Hello and welcome to Wrestling at Random. I'm Jeremy Deemer.
And I am Adam Summers.
This is the podcast where every week we review a classic pro wrestling event from a streaming service.
That classic pro wrestling event could be a major television special, a huge arena card from the territory days, a home video release with original matches, or in the case of this week's show, one of the most iconic annual pay-per-view events on the WWF/WWE calendar. We're reviewing the 2003 edition of the Royal Rumble.
Let's go take a little trip down memory lane back to October 4th, 1987. A match that was created by famous wrestler Pat Patterson would make its debut in St. Louis in front of 1,976 fans. At this show, they announced that the winner of this new type of battle royal would face Hulk Hogan 5 weeks later at the next show when WWF came back to town. During intermission of this same show, they announced for the next show the main event would be Hulk Hogan defending the title against the One Man Gang. Later in the show, the One Man Gang would indeed win the first Royal Rumble style match, and the crowd hated this.
So they spoiled their own finish by
Exactly.
putting the tickets on sale during the intermission. That is, wow.
The
That's
rules,
impressive.
Yeah, so first the rules were confusing. So people didn't understand the 2-minute intervals. And then the finish was spoiled at the intermission. So this match, because it was so poorly received, has been stricken from WWE Royal Rumble history. They came back to the idea for the next Royal Rumble on January 24th, 1988. This show would go head-to-head with the NWA and Jim Crockett Promotions' Bunkhouse Stampede pay-per-view.
A theme, by the way, that we've talked about on previous editions of this podcast, most notably, I believe, on the Clash of the Champions 89 show that we reviewed, where the two companies were regularly scheduling major events against each other.
Yeah, this show in 1988 was a big rating success on the USA Network, with Hacksaw Jim Duggan winning the first official Royal Rumble. The next Rumble match on January 15th, 1989 would expand from 20 men to the now regular 30-man main event. The event would become the number 2 show for WWE behind WrestleMania after the stipulation was added in 1993 that the winner of the Royal Rumble match would go on to get a title match at WrestleMania.
I'll just jump in here, Jeremy, and say a couple things. First, Royal Rumble is by far my favorite WWF/WWE pay-per-view, and it's the one that most years I still try to make an effort to watch either live or shortly thereafter. Probably the only show I watch every year from WWE at this point. Also, you mentioned the stipulation of the winner going on to get a shot at the WWE Championship or the champion of their choosing, as it's been in some years. I would argue that from a pure enjoyment of the Royal Rumble match itself standpoint, it actually hurt the match in that you went from thinking anybody could win to a very, very small window of guys that could win. And it really hurt when you were doing Royal Rumble pools with your friends and you got like Rick Martel or Test, and you knew that, you knew your chances were very, very limited.
Although the Royal Rumble pool concept with your friends is one of the most fun things you can do with a WWE show, and you've got
Absolutely.
This is one of the things that could get casual fans over. Besides WrestleMania, casual fans would come over that didn't really watch wrestling pay-per-views because they would come over because they had a great time being part of the Royal Rumble pool, and a lot of the casual fans didn't know who had no chance to win, so they would get excited when they would see, that they got
Greg the Hammer Valentine.
Yeah, they didn't know who was old and washed up or a human intermission in the fact of Greg the Hammer Valentine. So we'll take you now to this show. This was the Royal Rumble from 2003. So the Royal Rumble setting us on the road to WrestleMania 19.
Which, by the way, if you're a new listener of this podcast, listen to this show, and then immediately after you listen to this show, listen to our two-episode review of WrestleMania 19, as you mentioned, just a couple months after this. It's a little weird for us that the randomizer chose this kind of in reverse order, but if you're listening out of order, it'll actually be in order.
Yeah, and if you go back and listen to those shows, you listen to part 1 and then you listen to part 2. I still don't know who the 20 people are that listened to part 2 without downloading part 1. So
yes, that discrepancy in streams and downloads of part 1 and part 2, it bothers Jeremy almost as much as when two wrestlers wear the same color gear when they face off against each other.
Oh, so go back to the catalog to enjoy that one. That is one of the most fun shows we've done here, is the WrestleMania 19 review. But here we're on the road to WrestleMania. We get an opening video package, and we're in full Raw SmackDown brand split mode. So
yes, they're trying to convince us that this actually matters. That there's 15 men from Raw, 15 men from SmackDown. Again, it's a great video package because if there's one thing that is consistent throughout the history of that company, it's that they know how to produce opening video montages and feud summarizing video packages. But like, I was watching very, very regular at this point, as we've talked about before, because pretty much every other American wrestling company I liked was dead, so I had no choice. In 2003, I could not have told you until the announcers mentioned it in any of these matches which guy was on Raw and which guy was on SmackDown. Yeah. Now, no earthly idea. So whatever they were doing, it didn't take in my brain here some 17 years later.
No, and I do love in these video packages the serious promos from everybody about how important main eventing WrestleMania is to them. These were always great because they were sincere. And we're told the road to WrestleMania starts tonight, and we're off and running from the Fleet Center in Boston, Massachusetts. This is a legit sellout crowd, announced at 15,338 fans.
Very brightly lit arena. They wanted to make sure you saw how many people were in there, and rightfully so. They sold it out, so brag, show us. My favorite thing about the presentation of this show is they had not yet had the WrestleMania sign that everyone points to awkwardly after they win a match on the road to WrestleMania. So I was happy we were not at that point yet in the history of WWE.
Michael Cole and Taz are your SmackDown match announcers.
And they get to be ringside. They're not stuck way up in the rafters. They're not out in the parking lot. Michael Cole didn't wear his casual sweater. He dressed up with a slightly fancier, darker sweater here.
Yes, allowed at ringside for the opening match, where the winner will be entered into the Royal Rumble match later tonight.
They were a little unclear here, and they actually didn't clarify it. I don't think until the very end if they clarified it at all. I think actually, no, they did at the very end after the match was over. They clarified that the winner was not the 30th entrant in terms of being number 30. They would just be the 30th and final entrant in the match. It was just strange that they're usually so intentional on clarifying things. They did not. However, Taz did clarify things and say that this was going to be, quote, a rocket buster, or I should say a rocket busta.
The Big Show is out first. He's managed by Paul Heyman, and he will be taking on Brock Lesnar. Lesnar, he enters the ring by jumping from the ground to the apron, like he does if you've seen Brock Lesnar. But at this point in his career, he's still jumping over the top rope into the ring. Absolutely freaky agility. What an athlete. I love just watching young Brock Lesnar do crazy impressive things.
Yeah, he's ridiculously athletic to the point to where it almost doesn't seem real. He also facially looks like he's 6 years old, which just adds to the visual. And speaking of visuals, we do have to give a bit of a fashion report here. I mean, Brock Lesnar is just wearing Brock Lesnar gear from this time period. That's what he's wearing. But the Big Show, who is the biggest show I can recall him being, he's certainly near his biggest, he is wearing his traditional black singlet, and then he is wearing a type of jeans that we will see several times throughout the night, but they are obviously larger on the Big Show than anyone else. They're those like JNCO, FUBU, Hardy Boys type of jeans. he looks ridiculous here.
Yeah, no, it looked like he wore his gear under his clothes.
Yes,
and
then just took his shirt off.
He was late, and they're like, "Hurry up, get your shirt, get out there!" And all he had time to do was take his shirt off and get out to the ring.
Yeah, so it also made me think that he probably wore the singlet at all times. Like he was both not in gear and always in gear.
That's right. So it's
kind of like the Tim Sylvia of WWE. He wasn't Tim Sylvia, former UFC champion, who would literally go everywhere wearing the UFC title, including a very small MMA show that I attended when he was the UFC champion. He was there to be the referee of the main event, which featured not Matt Hughes, but his twin brother, Mark Hughes. And everywhere throughout the building, Tim Sylvia was walking around in street clothes, wearing his UFC championship belt clasped tightly around his waist. What a man.
Well, glass houses, I can't throw stones. I would do the exact same thing. Right. So we've got all Lesnar early, including 2 belly-to-belly suplexes on the almost 500-pound Big Show.
Overhead belly-to-belly suplexes here. These were impressive.
Yeah, Lesnar goes for a third, but Show powers out, throws Lesnar over the top rope. He hits his back on the apron as he goes all the way down to the floor. This
was nasty.
Oh, it was nasty.
This is bad.
Yeah, back in the ring, Show with just big chops to Lesnar in the corner. Misses a charge. Lesnar hits a German suplex. So Heyman jumps on the apron. Lesnar takes a swing at him as he drops to the floor. Heyman grabs both of Lesnar's legs, holding them, which allows Show to hit a big boot to Lesnar's face. Big Show goes for the chokeslam. But Lesnar counters by taking him down, controlling the arm.
Arm drag into a roll-up.
Yeah, controlling the arm and then into a pinning combination for a near fall. It was very cool counter.
Absolutely. We should also just mention how strange it was here to go back in time and see the situation where Paul Heyman was with someone going against Brock Lesnar, particularly because in my mind, like I had completely forgotten about this. I remembered Paul Heyman as a manager, agent, bringing Brock Lesnar into the WWE, WWF. And then I had completely forgotten about this turn. So that was weird to see. But yet you can't go wrong with Brock Lesnar just throwing around giant men, and you're not going to find a more giant man than the Big Show here. And that's the one thing that you can say about Show. Even, we talked about Big Boss Man, Big Bubba Rogers, Ray Traylor, and his weight fluctuations. Show very similar, maybe to an even more extreme degree given his height. But even when he was at his biggest, he still would take anything from anybody. And he bumped far better than you would ever expect a man of his size to do.
Yeah, and in this match specifically, he has a back injury and is still just taking tons of bumps for Lesnar. So it was pretty impressive to see. Heyman's on the apron again. This time Lesnar grabs him, pulls him over the top rope, puts Heyman on his shoulders to give him an F5, but he turns around into the Big Show, who slaps his hand on the throat of Lesnar. Lesnar drops Heyman, and Show hits the choke slam. A good near fall here.
Yeah, that was a great spot. It was a great WWE style spot. Ref or manager interference, like it came off perfectly. A lot of times you see stuff like this in other companies, and it's very wonky and looks lame. This was guys who are great experts at this, and it came off well.
Second choke slam attempt is countered. Lesnar shoves Show, which knocked Heyman off the apron. Lesnar hits the F5 on the Big Show, gets the 3 count. This crowd was hot for that finish. 6 minutes, 29 seconds. Brock Lesnar's in the Royal Rumble match.
They were particularly hot for that F5. From him, the moment he started picking him up till the moment Big Show helicopter down to the mat, and the ref counted 3 of the people were into this. Like you said, short, under 7 minutes long. Felt more like a TV match than a pay-per-view match, but I don't need to see these two guys go 20 minutes. And obviously, given that Brock Lesnar was going to be wrestling later on the evening in the Royal Rumble, this was perfectly fine for what it was and what it needed to be.
Terry Runnels is interviewing Chris Jericho in the back.
Chris Jericho, by the way, wearing a "Don't Be an Ass Clown" shirt.
That he was. Basically, Mr. McMahon made Shawn Michaels the number 1 entrant, and so Chris Jericho chose to be number 2 in his quest to prove that he's better than Shawn Michaels here. So advancing that feud.
Yeah, I love the idea that this advanced that feud, and it was perfect in that sense. But I hated that we had the number 1 and 2 guys already known. That's one of the best parts of the Royal Rumble is Howard Finkel. You know, the anticipation as Howard Finkel tells us who the music hits, and then he announces who the number 1 guy is, who the number 2 guy is. All that was taken away here.
Yeah, just like, one of the most surprising ones was when Demolition was 1 and 2.
Yes, absolutely.
Jerry Lawler and Jim Ross are your Raw announce team.
I am cringing already and cursing at the TV because I'm going to have to listen to Jerry Lawler again here in this era. We'll see if he's not as bad as he was on some of these other shows that I've just absolutely ripped him to shreds.
World Tag Team Championship. The challengers are the Dudley Boys versus the World Tag Team Champions, Lance Storm and William Regal. What a team here. I was super
I'd forgotten
excited
about them teaming. Also, apparently, so this was not that long after the Dudleys reunited. So is this, because also we see Batista later and he's not Deacon Batista. So I'm assuming this is after they do the whole thing with Devon as the preacher. When they did the brand split, and they tried to do Bubba. Basically, Bubba was Dusty Rhodes, and Devon was a preacher with Deacon Batista. Then this was after they dropped both of those, and these two guys were back together. I'm assuming that's the timeline.
I believe that is the timeline. Yes. Regal has been using brass knuckles to win matches recently, so referee Nick Patrick pats Regal and Storm down outside the ring. Good news, no weapons found. So we are ready to go.
Gonna have a clean match here,
sure. No shenanigans here. So
we also were informed that the Dudleys assaulted, here we go with this name again, Chief Morley on Raw leading up to this. So there's going to be some Chief Morley. That's Val Venus, or the Big Valboski, one of his other gimmicks in the WWE.
So Bubba starts with Lance Storm after some back and forth.
Chain wrestling Bubba here. Doing
right.
Moves, doing arm ringers and arm drags.
Storm's on his back. Bubba puts a standing figure 4 on him. And
this was weird.
Well, we love the little things here on this podcast, and we like to point them out. So while he's in this weird standing figure 4 submission hold, we see Lance Storm waving for Regal to come into the ring to make the save.
Yes,
which he does. So I like the Regal just doesn't run in, but he Storm's letting him know he's in trouble and he should come in. This was the little things we love here.
Well, my take on this team as this match goes along is that Lance Storm and William Regal should have teamed together for the rest of their careers, because they were perfect in that each guy's strength was the other guy's weakness. Like, Regal was a great wrestler, but wasn't always in the best shape and wasn't this like amazing athlete, but he was a great pro wrestler who had incredible facial expressions, incredible selling. Whereas Lance Storm was this super, super smooth wrestler that wasn't the most charismatic guy, didn't really have the best facial expressions, but, was just an absolute technician in the ring. Like, these two guys fit so well together.
They were great. And yeah, I wanted more out of this. So
I wanted more, and I wanted these guys in a different company in a different era.
Yes, they should have been together their whole career. I loved these guys as a team. Devon's in with Regal. Regal throws him into the corner. Devon charges in. Storm pulls Regal out of the corner. Then they quickly hit a double clothesline on Devon.
Double clothesline with one of them on the apron and one in the ring. I really like that. And again, different.
Regal and Storm working over Devon. Both these guys are so good. We were just mentioning it, but again, watching these two double team and watching them just technicians. It was
How about Regal with the monkey flip out of the corner? That was awesome. It basically into the corner. Then Lance Storm tags in. We get a cravat, and I immediately start thinking about how proud the man of 1,000 holds, not Dean Malenko, but that's right, Les Thornton would be at this moment.
Jim Ross even calls out what great technique both these guys have, and it's a wild understatement.
Yes.
Devon gets the hot tag to Bubba. He comes in, runs wild on both Storm and Regal. Storm and Regal thrown into the same corner, and Bubba squashes both of them with an avalanche. Bubba hits Storm with a release German suplex. And then he hits Storm with the Bubba Bomb, which JR called it a Bubba Slam. This
move sucks.
This is one of dumb move.
It's one of the worst moves in the history of professional wrestling. You put a guy in a full Nelson, you pick him up, and then you fall to your ass as he falls to his ass, and this is supposed to cause pain, more pain to the man that's getting the move done to him than the man that does the move. Buys.
No, this move is so dumb. We rant about it every time we see it. It makes it's awful. Devon blind tags in. Bubba holds Regal's legs open as he lays on his back on the mat. Devon to the top rope, hits the low headbutt.
But what's up? Because we are living in a Budweiser commercial in the early 2000s.
Flapjack on Storm. Long 2 count here. The Dudleys in position for the 3D, but here comes the Chief of Staff Morley, that former Val Venus you mentioned. He comes out. He's talking to the ref, trying to get the referee to disqualify them, but as this is happening, Regal has put on brass knuckles. And
we don't see from where.
We don't know where he came from. He's got him, and he walks right into a 3D where Devon picks up the guy into a flapjack, and Bubba hits him with a cutter on the way down. Bubba punches Morley. Devon grabs the knuckles and nails Storm with the brass knuckles. Devon, with the cover on Storm, gets the 3 count. We have new World Tag Team Champions, the Dudley Boys, at 7 minutes, 24 seconds.
This was perfectly fine. It was also given this era in WWE where if it wasn't a TLC match, something like that, the tag team division was pretty much an afterthought. So you weren't going to get a whole lot more than this here. It was fine. I would put it slightly above for rating tag team matches early on in cards on shows we've reviewed. This is somewhere in that Nasty Boys versus Harlem Heat or Freebirds versus Taylor Made Man, Greg Valentine pantheon, but it's better because you have Regal and Storm here. I also liked how Jerry Lawler just completely forgot as they were doing the replay. He completely forgot what Regal's WWE name was and just called him Steve Regal.
Yes.
I love that.
So we get a video package for Nathan Jones, the Colossus of Boggo Road.
First, we get a video package where they're telling us where WWE is going to be on the road for the next 2 weeks. And I'm just like, oh my God, they were still doing this in 2003? It felt like something out of like a control center in the mid 80s. But then, yes, we get that video package for the Colossus of Boggo Road.
That's the prison where he's serving time for armed robbery. And you see this video package. He looks super impressive. But, spoiler alert, he will not be. And
no. Terrible. A truly awful professional wrestler that he was just, God love the guy, bless his heart, as people would say in certain areas of the country, but he was hopeless as a professional wrestler. It didn't start off good. It wasn't going to get better, and it didn't get better. The video package, like you said, was fantastic, though. He's in the prison. He's screaming. They do these effects where he looks like his head's going to explode, basically. And then he just turns to the camera and says, "I'm Nathan Jones. Good day." And again, yeah, I'm watching this and thinking, worst case scenario, we're going to have another Sid Vicious. Best case scenario, it's going to be a lot better than that. But obviously, it didn't work out that way.
Speaking of things that are horrible, no good, will never get better. We've got Dawn Marie versus Tori Wilson it's announced as a stepmother versus stepdaughter match. Now,
this storyline and this video package talk about things, and we've had a few of them on this podcast over the nearly 30 episodes that we've done. There have been matches and stories that we've seen it, and we've realized that our brains have tried to wipe these clear from our memory, and then everything just comes flooding back when we have to watch this for this podcast and talk about it. Yeah. This falls squarely in that category. One of the worst, dumbest storylines, I would say, in my 36 years of watching professional wrestling.
We see the video of Dawn Marie marrying Tori's dad, Al Wilson. Now, I had Al Wilson memories when I saw him they were positive. I'm like, hey, I remember he was a good character, but then
It was funny.
This storyline is just so bad. Dawn Marie is using Al for something.
Yeah, apparently for his money, but it doesn't really make sense because she's a wrestler in the WWE. He is not. So one would assume that she has more money than him. Maybe I'm giving the WWE in 2003 more credit. But yes, it is not explained exactly why, but she's manipulating and using Al. And the story as we see through the vignettes is either due to the sex that they had just had or the sex that they were about to have. This caused Al Wilson to die.
He died on their honeymoon.
And the cameras happen to be there, which is just, again, as I'm watching this, like, why am I supposed to believe or care about any single moment of this?
And then we see clips from the funeral where Dawn slaps Tori at the funeral. Tori slaps her back.
It's
and
the
casket falls.
The public viewing of Al Wilson. Dawn Marie is there wearing all black, wearing like a veil, a shroud, whatever. Tori was not invited, but she shows up. She goes to the casket. She's crying, and then Dawn comes up behind her and hits her with a vase. The casket falls over. I write down this is impossibly stupid, and I believe it's in size 12 font, but it should have been in size 1200 font. This made me so angry and embarrassed to spend as much of my time in my life as I do on professional wrestling. Then we have, so the video package is over. Now we're going to have a wrestling match to settle this.
Now, wait a second. I do want to say here, when I finished watching this vignette, getting caught up on this storyline, if you're wondering how bad this storyline is because you didn't see it in 2003, and we're not making it sound bad enough. You're like, hey, that might have been intriguing. No, it wasn't. It was horrible.
It was not.
And it was the thing. Any wrestling fan who listens to this podcast, you've been a wrestling fan for a while, you know that feeling when you're watching something and you hope that your friend or your significant other do not come into the room as you're watching it because it's embarrassing and it's bad stuff. And it's that thing that you're like, oh man, no, wrestling's good like way more % of the time than it is this horrible stuff.
Yeah.
And it's always that time when that horrible stuff is that someone who's not a fan walks by and says, whoa, how do you watch that stuff? This is that. This is exactly that. It's that
there's
feeling.
There's no good answer to that question. If someone says, how do you watch that stuff? When they walk in and see you watching this, you just say, I don't know why.
Yes.
And then you just put your head down and you hope they leave the room. No, this is that. If you're a child and your parents walk in the room and see you watching this, you are 100% convinced you're never going to be allowed to watch wrestling again. And if you are in a relationship and your non-wrestling fan significant other walks into the room, you're 100% convinced that you are no longer going to be in a relationship.
Yeah, so that's how bad this was.
And you also have in the back of your mind, you're like, well, if my girlfriend broke up with me over this, I couldn't really blame her. Because why am I watching this? It was that bad. So with all that said, the only way to settle this existential struggle that we have between these two women is in a professional wrestling match with professional wrestling rules. As such, Dawn Marie comes down to the ring wearing pro wrestling gear. Then we get the introduction
and a black veil. She's got a
black veil, which was a nice touch. We get the introduction of Tori Wilson, who I will note on the Fashion Report is roughly wearing the exact same gear as Easy Money.
No, but less weird, less gross.
Slightly. That was my first thought. I don't know what that says about me. That is what I thought when I saw this presentation of this professional wrestler here. But it is what first thought popped into my mind, and it is what I wrote down here. The match starts with Tori Wilson, who apparently has had weeks to contemplate this match, walking into the ring and then starting to cry. The referee consoles her and asks her if she wants to go through. Dawn Marie slaps her and says, I'll give you something to cry about, which that was great because Dawn Marie is great as a character outside of these horrible storylines. But then they just have a wrestling match.
Yeah, she jumped Tori before the bell when the ref was checking to see if she wanted to go through with it. Big slap. Tori, she ends up fighting back. She grabs Dawn by the legs into a slingshot, and Dawn lands face first in the ring.
It was basically the slingshot that you would see, and I think we saw several times on this show, where you do it from the middle of the ring into the corner. Instead, it was just from the corner into the middle of the ring. It looked uncomfortable. It was not something I would want to do.
Now, Dawn takes Tori down with an armbar, Fujiwara armbar style.
Yes, exactly what Yoshiaki Fujiwara intended with this armbar. This is where he thought it would go.
So Dawn Marie on offense, it's slow. It's almost hesitant at times.
There is a really ugly spot in this match where Tori stops in the corner. Dawn Marie runs at her, and then Tori kind of runs at her, and they just bonk heads. And it did not look like it was fun for either of them.
No, it looked like Dawn was going for like a single leg takedown or something, and Tori was ducking down at the same time. And yeah, they bonked heads. This was ugly.
It's a classic pro wrestling mistake, though. To be fair to Dawn Marie and Tori Wilson, this same thing, a variation of this same thing, happened with The Undertaker and Steve Austin, I believe, in the main event of SummerSlam 98. And like Undertaker was one of them, I can't remember, was Undertaker or Austin, was legit concussed, and the match was kind of wonky from there. So it does happen, but it was painful to watch here. Thankfully, there was not a whole lot left of this match afterwards. And again, I'll just say, I don't necessarily blame either of them for this. Neither of them were full-time wrestlers. They were put in a really stupid storyline and then had to just do a pro wrestling match. So yeah.
For all of the TV time that they got, I mean, that vignette package was long, and you know that was week after week after week on television. That was a lot of TV time dedicated to this story. Nobody cared in the building. Not a single person cared. It was dead silent to just almost like angry that this match was still happening. And
this was the ultimate, like, we make movies, but it not actually overlaying onto what people pay to see when they come into the building at all.
Yeah, Dawn actually seemed like a much better wrestler here than Tori.
Oh, for sure.
And the finish came as Dawn puts her head down for a backdrop, but Tori kicks her in the face, hits a swinging neck breaker, gets a 3 count. This was boring bad. Not even the funny kind of bad. It was like, I still don't know what Dawn was using Al for, and I don't know how.
And why was just like a catch-as-catch-can pro wrestling match what was going to settle this? Like, there was no, I don't know. I understand the limitations of the wrestlers involved, but I wanted to see if this was going to happen, and Tori is outraged. Like, I want to see people getting thrown into guardrails. I want to see people's heads getting slammed off the mat. Instead, it was just, they did moves, but Tori was sad.
I don't know. I'm going to blow your mind right now. 3 minutes, 36 seconds.
Oh my God.
It felt so much longer.
It felt so much longer, and I would guarantee that video package was longer than the match.
Yeah. So in the back, Stephanie McMahon and Eric Bischoff, the GMs.
And Randy Orton, who is approximately 12 years old.
Yes, they're the GMs of Raw and SmackDown, and they're talking with a very young Randy Orton. Vince says that he's going to fire Bischoff in 30 days, so Bischoff has an atomic bombshell. Stephanie says blood's thicker than urine, and Bischoff says money's thicker than blood. Okay.
This sucked. Both of them. Stephanie can actually be good at times in things like this. So Eric Bischoff is a great TV character, but the writing of this and the acting, because that's what this is. This isn't wrestling at this point. This is backstage acting out scripts. It was just so lame and stilted, which is also surprising because later on, or in other situations, I actually thought Bischoff and Stephanie like had great chemistry together.
This was
in these sorts of things, but this was not good. Then we go to something that, wow, completely forgotten to the sands of time.
Yes.
The brief period of very intriguing, weird vignettes with Sean O'Hare, of all people, the former power plant member, the former member of the I can't remember the name of the group that Mike Sanders was the leader of in the latter days of WCW. Here, Sean O'Haire is wearing a suit. There's just a white background. He's telling people don't go to church. There's no God. Church is a farce. And then his whole thing is like his catchphrase is, "I'm not telling you anything you don't already know."
Yeah, this gimmick and push was a failure. They even brought in Rowdy Roddy Piper to be his manager at one point. And in late November 2003, so this is January 2003, we see these vignettes for Sean O'Haire. Late November 2003, he was involved in a motorcycle accident, which required a lot of stitches and kept him out of action for the next month or so. When he recovered in February 2004, he was sent back to OVW, which was the developmental territory at the time. And then he was released from his contract in April of 2004, and that's the end of Sean O'Haire. And
wow,
they literally had this push there was a ton of vignettes like this,
yes.
And
this went on for a while.
It went on for quite a while. He got a push.
And people were actually excited.
Yeah, he got Piper as a manager, and it went nowhere. It was a big zero. World Heavyweight Championship. The champion, Triple H, with his manager, Ric Flair, versus the challenger, Big Papa Pump, Scott Steiner. We referenced this on that WrestleMania 19 show when we talk about just a lot of the weird things that were happening with this was the worst of the era of Triple H, just Triple H-ing everything and everyone. Both on TV and backstage. It's also the worst of Triple H's Ric Flair cosplay era, right down to the story with this, by the way. You mentioned that Triple H is the world heavyweight champion. That is the big gold belt that people most associate with the NWA and later WCW. The story for this was that to get heat on Triple H, he was given the World Heavyweight Championship by Eric Bischoff. When they did the brand split, they needed two world champions eventually. And so you had the WWE title on SmackDown, and then you had on Raw the World Heavyweight Championship, which was literally just given to him in ring in one of those long 20-minute Triple H promos. And then that brought us to here. We have a video package, which I'm sure you'll mention, talking about Scott Steiner's entry into the WWE. This video package was awesome. It got me so hyped to watch this match. They showed Steiner signing with Raw, interrupting Triple H backing down. We got to see Steiner beating Triple H in an arm wrestling match, a pose down, doing
a push-up contest.
Yeah,
the build-up to this was great, and this was a
awesome.
hallmark of Triple H storylines around this time, was that the build-up would be great. What you saw on TV would get you really excited. And then what they did when the match actually happened was not so much.
Hebner gives instructions saying he's not putting up with their crap. And
he says, "I'm not putting up with anything from you." And he points at Scott Steiner. He says, "I'm not putting up with anything from you." And he points at Triple H. And then he says most loudly, "And I'm not putting up with anything from you," at Ric Flair.
During these instructions, Steiner looks like he's blown up already just from his entrance. God. He is huffing and puffing already. And I do like that they start out throwing punches. There's no lockups here. This is just a fight. This is good stuff early. It's Steiner with lots of chops and forearms.
Well, we should point out that what the storyline going into this match was that all those things that you talked about, the push-up contest, the pose down, all of it, Scott Steiner had beaten Triple H. I don't know how you win a pose down contest, but that was the case here. And he had beaten down Triple H several times physically. And so the story that they were telling coming into this, both Jim Ross and Jerry Lawler, was that Triple H was deathly afraid of Scott Steiner. He feared him, and it seemed almost like a foregone conclusion that Scott Steiner was just going to run through Triple H and defeat him here.
And early, he hits Triple H with an overhead press slam. Steiner is strong. And Steiner starts working over Triple H's lower back, including a Boston Crab, bear hug.
Setting up the Steiner recliner.
Exactly. Overhead belly to belly by Steiner. He goes for that Steiner recliner. That's his camel clutch, but Flair pulls Triple H to safety. Steiner comes out after Flair, and Flair begging off is always awesome. Ric Flair is the star of this match, as he is every time he's a manager. Unbelievable.
By such a wide margin. Again, we talked about it with the match with Booker T a couple of months later at WrestleMania. Flair is so great here. He has so much more charisma and so much more energy than either of the two men that are actually wrestling here. And you find yourself wondering, how is Ric Flair not the man in this match? He is so awesome. We also, at this point, you start to hear some light Steiner sucks chants, which, Steiner is the face here, but this is one of those perfect sort of political things from Triple H where he knows that Scott Steiner is much more effective as a heel than he is as a face. And Triple H being Triple H in 2003, the situation is, well, Scott Steiner will be the face. This won't work. Bye-bye, Scott Steiner.
Well, and the longer it goes. So if this is a short match and Steiner is explosive and gets to do Scott Steiner things, then that's good. People love it. But the longer it goes, the more you saw the crowd start to turn on Steiner, the more Steiner was exposed here of where he was in his career at this point.
Well, that's a great point, because this match felt like it was specifically put together to expose every one of Scott Steiner's weaknesses here in his big moment on the stage. And again, you can't forget how petty the WWE was at this point. And Scott Steiner, although he had spent time a decade prior in the WWE when it was the WWF, Scott Steiner was, along with Booker T, the standard bearer of the later days of WCW. And so this is another one of those examples of, well, let's figure out a way to make WCW look bad, even though it's been 2 years since we already killed the company. And yeah, they were pretty effective in reaching their goal. Steiner
charges Triple H in the corner, eats a boot to the face, and this allows Flair to... What's that?
I have to jump in here because I know it's a little thing, but no wrestler in the history of professional wrestling, whether it was when he was Steiner Brothers, Scott Steiner, or even here later in his career is more limited. Nobody took that better than Scott Steiner, where you Irish whip a guy into the corner, you run in, and the guy gets the boot up. Steiner somehow figured out a way to take this, just looking like he gets absolutely murdered, but it happens in the safest way possible, and he's fine. I could watch him do that on every show.
This gives Flair the opportunity to take his jacket off and choke Steiner with it while Triple H has the ref distracted. Again, Triple H is distracting the ref, more choking by Flair. Flair might be one of the greatest underrated managers of all time.
Yeah.
Steiner counters a pedigree attempt into a slingshot, Triple H into the buckles. Steiner picks up Triple H into a tombstone piledriver position.
This whole sequence is rough.
Steiner is wincing. You can see it on his face as he's got him up in this piledriver position. Triple H reverses it, puts Steiner on his shoulder.
And Steiner reverses the reversal.
Yeah, he slides off. Triple H has him in a cutter position, but ends up with a neck breaker. This was sloppy and a little scary.
Yeah, it was bad. It could have ended probably 3 different times in this short sequence. It could have ended much worse than it did as far as the health of both men. But yeah, it ended with this sloppy diamond cutter neck breaker where I think Scott Steiner thought he was supposed to take a diamond cutter. Triple H was going for a neck breaker, and it kind of landed halfway and was not very good. What was great, though, was right after this, Triple H hits a vertical suplex. That's fine. But then Flair is so great with the crowd, motioning for everybody to get on their feet. And 15,000, whatever, is 182 people complied because it's Ric Flair, and why would you not?
Angry Flair on the outside of the ring is awesome. Cheerleading Ric Flair on the outside is awesome. This was so great. Triple H, off the second rope, gets caught with another overhead belly-to-belly suplex. A couple.
This
Steiner
looks bad, by the way. This looked like, basically, I in my notes, I write this down. I think this is an accurate assessment. Triple H lazily jumps off the second rope, going for nothing in particular, and Steiner hits the belly-to-belly as Flair yells, H, 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 over and over again. And that's just another thing I love about Ric Flair, that he calls him H.
A couple Steiner lines, more belly-to-bellies, like 4 of them. Steiner, okay, here we go. This is where they lose the crowd. This is where they lose everything right here. Steiner has him hooked. Double underhook.
Oof.
Picks him up for a slam, but Steiner falls over. He's both going for collapse. This was awful.
He's going for his double underhook power bomb, which he used to do in his younger days. He'd sit out. It was a Tiger driver. But in later days, he basically double underhook, flip the guy over and then just let him fall like a power bomb. But Steiner, either his back or his legs give out. It's an extreme close-up, so you don't see how bad it is, but you can tell it's not good. And yeah, this crowd, which has been teetering on the edge of completely lost. Of completely rejecting Scott Steiner's presence in this company. This was the moment where they had decided they did not want to see Scott Steiner anymore.
Yeah, the crowd was lost after that one. Both men on the top. Steiner hits a superplex. Flair grabs the belt, and Flair and Triple H start walking up the ramp to leave. Steiner runs after them, and thank God it was shot in a way that you couldn't actually see Steiner run. So that was good. He knocks both men down in the entranceway. The ref's restraining Crazy Flair, who's yelling at Steiner, as Triple H tried to hit Steiner with the title belt. It's blocked. He hits Triple H with it, and Triple H is busted open. He's bleeding everywhere. Tries to flee through the crowd. Steiner brings him back in. Steiner does push-ups to taunt Triple H in what up to this point was one of the best spots in the match for me.
Yeah, that was the best moment of this match that didn't involve Ric Flair by far. And it was the only thing that happened in this entire match that felt connected to the entire story that led up to the match.
Yeah, Flair pleads with the ref to stop the match due to blood, but Hebner won't because it's not the early 80s.
Well, yeah, I'm having a flashback, though, because the announcers say, just like that horrible stipulation in the Jake Roberts match that we reviewed last week on the last Battle of Atlanta, Georgia Championship Wrestling show from 1983, the announcers basically say that if the ref stops the match, the title won't change hands.
Yeah.
Here in 2003.
Triple H intentionally throws the ref outside the ring, but Hebner won't disqualify him. Says no.
Well, he does this whole hesitation spot where he walks across the ring, he goes to signal to the timekeeper, and then stops his arm at the last minute and says, nope, that's what you want. I'm not going to do it.
If you're saying to yourself at this point, boy, this match sure seems like it's long, you're right. It is. It is too long, way too long.
Yes,
and we're not done yet. Triple H hits a low blow on Steiner, rolls him up for a near fall. Triple H hits Steiner with a sledgehammer in the stomach, and the ref calls for the bell. This was so lame. It went on way too long, and then you get this extra crappy finish. Steiner gets the sledgehammer. He hits Triple H in the stomach with it, and then he hits Flair in the stomach, and you've never seen anyone sell a shot with a sledgehammer better than Ric Flair. He sold it like
shocking,
he was
hit,
right? He sold it like he was legit hit with a sledgehammer, like it would kill you because
he sold it like he got hit by a train in the stomach. It was so great.
It was the best thing, and I always thought this was a ridiculous weapon to use in wrestling because it would just kill people.
Well, it's one step removed from someone just bringing a gun out. It's too deadly of a weapon. If you actually hit a human being in the head with a sledgehammer, you would kill them every time.
Yeah. So Steiner puts Triple H in the Steiner recliner. We get a cool shot of blood pouring out of Triple H's head as he's in the move. Tons of refs and Sergeant Slaughter and Bischoff finally pull Steiner off. 18 minutes and 14 seconds, at least 10 minutes too long. If this match was 7-8 minutes, we're having a different conversation here. Yeah, way too long.
8 minutes would have been fine. Steiner would have looked good, and you could have accomplished the same thing because you just did a DQ finish. Yep. So there's no reason to go this long other than in a calculated way to make Steiner look as bad as possible. I do have to give an addendum to the fashion report before we leave this match, because in the closing moments of this match, you mentioned that low blow from Triple H and the roll up. In the midst of that roll up and the tights being grabbed, we get a reveal of Scott Steiner's velvet thong.
We did, yes.
At this point, if the crowd had not turned on Scott Steiner by this point, They were merciless on him here as he is forced to wrestle these last few minutes of this match with said soft velour thong out for the world to see. The crowd was not as appreciative of this as they would be of similar attire for Lita during this time period.
So we've had a rough string of matches here, as
we have.
So
we have.
So we get to the WWE Championship. Your champion at the time here is Kurt Angle, and your challenger is Chris Benoit. Now, watching this match, this was, we mentioned it before we went on the air here, that this was, for me, this was the first singles Benoit match I've watched since the tragedy where he kills his wife and kid. And so, kind of Benoit had been stricken from my things I could enjoy anymore list. And so
same here. I had not watched until we started doing this podcast. I had not watched a single Chris Benoit match, a moment of a Chris Benoit match since he murdered his family, some 13 years ago. And as we also talked about leading up to recording this show, like Chris Benoit was my favorite wrestler. He had been my favorite wrestler for a decade. I was so emotionally invested in the story of him in WWE, trying to get to the top, trying to be a main eventer. And quite honestly, it was in the aftermath of WCW and ECW dying, and so much that I didn't enjoy about the WWE, the WWF. Like his story and him being there in his matches, they were the main reason that I kept watching. So I felt very uncomfortable going into watching this match because from a pure wrestling standpoint, how could you not be excited about these two men wrestling against each other? But man, it was really, really weird to be sitting here watching Chris Benoit, not like in like a multi-man tag match or in a battle royal like we've seen the few other times that he's appeared on shows we've reviewed for this podcast. This was Chris Benoit in a featured match that is one of the cornerstone moments of his WWE career. And yeah, I did not know how to feel about it going in, but yeah, that's where we are as this match is about to start.
Yeah, and I going in, I was like, ugh, yeah, I didn't feel great about it, about watching it, but it sucked me in about, like as it got going, it took me back to, how much I enjoyed his craft and how well what an amazing pro wrestler he was. And it immediately sucked me back in, and I ended up thoroughly enjoying the heck out of this match, until it was over.
Yeah, I did. Again, I don't even know how to properly communicate or verbalize it because there were like you find yourself, as you said, slipping into it and enjoying it and feeling how you felt.
Yes.
Back then.
There's a nostalgia.
And how invested you were.
Yeah.
And then like there would be moments, and again, within the match, not just afterwards, but within the match where I'd just be like, oh my God, Chris Benoit murdered his family. And again, I know this. I lived this. I did a podcast during this time period, and it was as affecting as anything in terms of a public eye story has ever been in my life. But I also have memory hold this from an emotional standpoint for so long that this was a strange experience to watch this match.
So we get a video recapping Kurt Angle defeating the Big Show for the title with interference from Brock Lesnar. Angle hires Paul Heyman to be his manager, and we see Benoit defeating Big Show to earn this title shot at the Royal Rumble. Team Angle is out first, which is Kurt Angle, Shelton Benjamin, and Charlie Haas.
And the first camera shot we see of them is covered, I'm assuming, completely in beer. And then they switched to another camera shot. It was weird, and it was also the rarest of the rare for those days, a WWE production snafu that they quickly rectified. Team Angle, as you mentioned, has big red, white, and blue pyro. They've got the matching gear. And as we talked about, even though we don't see them a ton on the show outside of the Battle Royal, Team Angle, that being Haas and Benjamin, were so good. We talked about it on the WrestleMania 19 show. Those guys should have been together for their entire careers.
Benoit is all business going right after Angle, but Team Angle pushes him away. The referees send Haas and Benjamin to the back, and we are going to have a one-on-one match here. Angle has a big brace on his knee, and it's interesting to note that this was Kurt Angle's second match back from legit knee surgery. Wow. And in his own words, Kurt Angle said that he was a half a step slow because of the recovery. Which it's interesting too, because in the storyline of this match, the announcers are basically saying that this is a fake knee injury, and that he's making this up, and he wasn't actually hurt. This was all part of the storyline with Brock Lesnar. I will note that Chris Benoit, even by Chris Benoit's standards, particularly in WWE, he was just massive here. Oh, yeah. His upper body was so much bigger than it should have been for the frame that it was attached to. As you said, the match starts off with a hard lockup, a side headlock by Benoit, and Michael Cole points out that Chris Benoit has in fact defeated Kurt Angle twice in recent months leading into this match. So that's sort of the story as well. Is not only is Benoit trying to break through, but he's been able to beat Angle before. Can he do it here with everything on the line? The first thing I noticed watching the beginning of this match is that Benoit is always moving forward. He's always moving forward, and Angle is always moving backward the entire time. And everything in the early going here is so snug. Everything is intense, and everything's tight from the start. You can feel the struggle with everything these guys are doing right out of the gate.
Yeah, I wrote very similarly in my notes that this is tight and super intense. You mentioned struggle. The other thing that I would say is that there is a sense of urgency that you don't see often in big WWE matches. This does not feel like a match that would happen in WWE. It feels, honestly, when you watch it, it feels like something that would be much more like it would be happening in the mid to late 2010s in New Japan Pro Wrestling. It just feels like a completely different world from what we've seen pretty much on this entire show. It feels, we've talked about this a few different times in different ways, but this match and the approach of both wrestlers in this match, it feels like if you accept all of the ridiculousness of pro wrestling, and I'm not talking about Torrie Wilson, Al Wilson stuff, but the ridiculousness of pro wrestling, like of guys getting thrown, and that meaning they have to run to the ropes and bounce off the ropes, or you pick a guy up for a slam and he just lets you slam him. Within the confines of that mindset, this feels like what guys would actually be doing if they were trying to win a pro wrestling match.
Angle sends Benoit shoulder first into the post and gets the advantage. He follows it up with clubbing forearms to the back and neck. Benoit had a neck injury just the previous July. So
they said this is his first title shot since returning from injury. Taz also mentioned that these two men used to be tag team champions together.
Totally. And they were Cole the first SmackDown tag team champions. Yeah.
No recollection of this whatsoever, which is shocking considering that it's these two guys teaming. Cole mentions that they were a great team, but never got along due to their egos.
Benoit, when he's throwing these chops, he's yelling with every chop, and I had forgotten that he did that, and it just it makes it it absolutely adds intensity to all that stuff.
Well, and even the way he holds his hands, they're not knife edge chops. Even though he's throwing them that style, his hands are like clawed, so that when he hits you, it is not just the flat of the flat of the palm hitting you. It is again not something I would enjoy having to do.
Both men are fighting on the ring apron, and Benoit drops Angle with the DDT on the ring apron. This was a move that almost never happened in WWE at this time, so the crowd audibly gasped at that. And then they showed a close-up on Angle, and he's got blood running down his nose. The replay shows Angle hitting head first, face first on this. It was absolutely brutal, and it was awesome. Just awesome.
It was. This was, like you said, this was not something you would see in the WWE at this point. This honestly felt, and maybe the better comparison for this match, honestly, isn't New Japan of like the modern era. It's Pro Wrestling Noah of the early to mid 2000s, because this is a very Pro Wrestling Noah big apron spot that then kind of sets the tone for the rest of the match. And a lot of the bombs that they're trading kind of have that same feel. There was a very, very, very uncomfortable line uttered by Michael Cole right around this time in the match where they're talking about Chris Benoit, and they're talking about Chris Benoit, how hard he's had to work to get to this point. And Michael Cole says, quote, Chris Benoit has sacrificed his family and his own life. And I just had to stop. I hit pause and I stopped watching the match for a while, because that just freaked me out hearing that. Obviously the context was different, but
sure.
Yeah.
Angle slam gets countered into a sharpshooter. This was impressive. Angle catches Benoit coming off the ropes with a quick belly-to-belly overhead throw. Angle.
This was so great. This belly-to-belly off the ropes. This was, and we would see him later in this match do it where he grabs the bear hug and then does the belly-to-belly. This was straight off the ropes. This was something you didn't see Angle do very often. I am willing to tell you, I'd be willing to bet that Chris Benoit, who wrestled Koji Kanemoto a lot in New Japan, and this was a Kanemoto spot, Benoit probably went to Angle and said, hey, if you want to do this, I can do this. I've done it before. And so they did it, and it was awesome.
Yeah, Angle in control has Benoit in a long rear naked choke. This is both men on the mat. Benoit ends up with an arm drag, gets free, but walks right into a belly-to-belly. Back to the rear naked choke again. And Angle and Benoit are both down after a double clothesline spot. Benoit battles back, rolling German suplexes. After two of them, Angle switches, hits one of his own. Benoit switches, hits the release German. Benoit then has the grossest snot rocket you've ever seen.
Well, and that release German, was that the point where it's or is that later in the match where it's the release German that flips Angle over?
No, that's later.
Yeah, that's later on. Okay, later, well, yeah. Still, what's notable here is that these two men each, like, this wasn't one of those deals like you'd see in a lot of Angle matches where like he'd do the rolling German and then his opponent who didn't usually use that set of moves would do that. Like he liked to do a lot of like move swapping, finisher swapping. Both guys regularly used the rolling German suplexes, so it was kind of a different wrinkle and really worked.
So yeah, after Benoit has the grossest snot rocket you've ever seen, he climbs to the top rope. Angle sprints up the ropes to meet him on the top turnbuckle, hits the belly-to-belly off the top rope, long 2 count.
Huge pop. One of the biggest, probably the most impressive spot of the show to this point.
And at this point, the crowd is really into it. And they've got him. Remember, the crowd had been killed.
Yes.
By having to watch Torrie Wilson and having to watch Scott Steiner let them down. It took a while to get the crowd back, and they've got him at this point. And
well, especially too, because this wasn't the Benoit of a couple years later where he was a made guy and was considered one of the top stars in the company. We were still in the middle of like, is that going to happen or not?
Yeah. Angle's slam gets countered into the crippler crossface. Benoit screaming at Angle to tap. Angle gets to the ropes.
The crowd audibly gasps at this point when Angle gets to the ropes. And like you said, this is another sign that they have got these people hook, line, and sinker at this point.
Benoit quickly slaps on Angle's own ankle lock. And Angle with the greatest counter reversal here to get the ankle lock onto Benoit. It was so cool to see, so smooth.
And then Benoit counters straight out of that into the crossface. Again, so smooth, and one of those things where you would think, well, there's really no logical or smooth way to go from the ankle lock into the crossface, but they absolutely pull it off here. And then Angle counters that.
Well, the way they did that, I want to talk about that counter because it was pretty creative. Benoit rolls to his back and then pulls Angle in for almost like a triangle choke. Yeah. But that's where he's able to transition into the crossface. Really neat.
And then Angle from there counters the crossface into, as Taz calls it, this banana split near fall, where it's almost like a crucifix, but you also have the legs neutralized. It gets a very close near fall for the two.
Yeah, Angle rolls through. Benoit still holding on, but Angle finally hits an Angle slam. These transitions and reversals were just so incredible.
Out of this world.
So smooth, while at the same time, that sense of struggle. And it's now amplified by exhaustion at this point.
Well,
so
that's what separates this match from a lot of the forced epic matches that you see a lot of guys have now, particularly I would say in North America, where like the drama of the reversals, all those things are there, but the struggle that somehow is mixed in with that smoothness and that exhaustion that comes across as so realistic. You don't see that very often like you do here. This was something special.
Angle crawls over. Benoit kicks out.
Long 2.99 repeating.
Angle puts on an ankle lock. Counter. Reversal again. But Benoit ends up in a roll-up position on Angle for a long 2 count. The crowd actually bought that as a finish. Then they trade German suplexes and switches until Benoit does a release German suplex. This is the one you talked about earlier, where Angle does a complete flip, landing chest first or face first almost. He basically
takes a moonsault bump off of a German suplex.
Yeah, and he sells it like he's out cold, like he's just been knocked out. Benoit then goes up, hits a diving headbutt onto Angle, who is way more than 3/4 across the ring.
Yeah. He's basically in the entranceway. Like he's out in the crowd somewhere. He's so far away. I could not believe.
When people say flying headbutt, this was a flying headbutt for all the air he had to cover. But Benoit was too hurt to cover Angle, so by the time he gets the cover on there, Angle kicks out.
And the crowd gasps again. The crowd was buying everything here. Every near fall felt like it could be the end.
Angle's back up, but he picks Benoit up for a powerbomb. But instead of coming down, he throws him over his head, face first into the buckles. Impact on the neck as well.
It was a buckle bomb, but it was facing away from the buckle. And instead of throwing the guy back and neck first, he landed head first. Very cool, very different. That's something you didn't see a lot back then. It's something you really never see now.
Angle slam, and something you never see, a 2 count. You see someone kicking out of the Angle slam at this point was extremely rare. So the place is going absolutely berserk when Benoit kicks out of that. Benoit with a crossface in the center of the ring. They're teasing the tap out, but Angle's able to roll enough to actually pick the ankle of Benoit into an ankle lock again.
Such a perfect counter. And again, it's struggle, but looked smooth and looked like if you accept that all of these moves are real, it looks like what you would need to do to get out of it and into the move you want to do.
Yeah, it is one of those reversals where only Kurt Angle could do that. What a talent. Unbelievable.
Kurt Angle, just briefly here. You look at these two guys. Chris Benoit had wrestled literally all over the world, everywhere. Canada, Mexico, Japan, all points in between, every style for 18 years, 16 years by this point. Kurt Angle was a couple years into his career. He had only ever wrestled in the WWE system, whether it be OVW or in the WWE. And he was 100% on the same level as Chris Benoit here and could hang with him with no problem. I feel like sometimes Kurt Angle, the sheer natural talent that he had for pro wrestling right out of the gate is somehow still undersold.
It absolutely is. And so Benoit's in the ankle lock. He tries to kick Kurt off, but Kurt won't let go. And over again, he won't let go. And when he does let go, he's right back to it.
The great thing about this too is that it was the counters that Benoit had successfully used earlier on when in the ankle lock. He basically ran through his Rolodex and tried each of them, but they didn't work.
Angle ends up wrapping his legs around the leg of Benoit, still in the ankle lock. Benoit has no choice at this point but to finally tap out. Still champion, Kurt Angle. Team Angle comes out to join him in the ring and celebrate. Kurt on their shoulders with the belt. This match was so awesome. 17 years later, you could drop this match on any show today, and it would still be just as awesome.
It would be the best match on the show. I wrote almost word for word the exact same thing. How long was this match?
19 minutes and 48 seconds. And it's the
1
opposite.
minute longer.
Yes.
Versus Scot Steiner. It's one of those things where like people say that like time is a human construct and it's not actually real. I never believe that more than watching these two matches back to back, because there is no way on the face of the earth or anywhere else in the universe that these two matches took up the same amount of time. It is impossible.
It's crazy to think that they were the same length, and it's the exact polar opposite of what the experience was of the previous match. Absolutely awesome. And so Benoit post-match stands in the ring. The crowd gives him a standing ovation, loud Benoit chants. This really makes him ascend.
This was the moment.
Next step. This was the moment where he's a main event guy. He's a champion. He's a championship contender now in the eyes of everyone. And the only thing that could have made this any better is if JR was calling this match instead of Michael Cole.
Yeah, I would agree. I was thinking as I watched, because Taz was great in this match.
Taz was great.
But yeah, Cole was Cole. This match, I don't know. We'll talk about it later when we talk about what our favorite match was of this show. And all I can say is I don't know that I've ever had more conflicted and complex feelings at the conclusion of a match than I did with this. Like, I was, in one sense, I was on the high of watching an incredible pro wrestling match, but I just felt extremely sad and extremely angry. And it's hard to really describe. And I'm sure I'm not the only one out there who, if you watch this show along with us, you probably had similar feelings. I don't know. Everyone's different if you've gone back and watched his matches or not. Like I said, I've made it an absolute point to not. And that honestly, when we started doing this podcast, Jeremy, when we started talking about, hey, we want to do a podcast together and let's figure something out. And when we came up with this idea, the first thing I thought of was, oh my God, I'm going to have to watch Chris Benoit matches. And that same feeling in a more complex and nuanced way is what I was feeling here sitting and watching this. And I don't think outside of the WrestleMania match where he won the title, I don't know that there's any match that would have evoked or will evoke as those feelings even more, because again, it took you back to how you felt as a fan of the character, the wrestler. And then you confront just the absolute horror and atrocity that he committed, and obviously one in a galactic cosmic way outweighs the other. And it is just, it was tough. I don't know really what else to say.
Absolutely. No, I think you summed it up exactly how a lot of us felt watching that, for sure. RVD and Kane are in the back. Kane tells Rob that it's every man for themselves tonight. Kane
talk about a forgotten
year.
Story. I'm watching Rob Van Damme and Kane, and one says it's every man for themselves to the other, and I'm like, well, no shit, you're Rob Van Damme and Kane. And then I remember, oh yeah, they were like a buddy cop show for a while.
Yeah, but I was totally distracted by the hole in the armpit of RVD's t-shirt. Speaking of Fashion Corner. Come on, Rob.
This was terrible. And again, Rob Van Dam is great being Rob Van Dam, but we get some of the worst WWE terrible stilted writing you'll ever get, where when Kane says this, first it's fine, like Rob Van Dam says whatever you want to do, it's cool. Then he says, and I quote, "You should do whatever you feel you need to do to ensure your victory."
And yeah, Rob's basically like, you mean every man for themselves? Got it.
A human being has never talked like that in their lives. Without a script in front of them. And then hearing Rob Van Dam, like the epitome of laid back, cool, talk in that way. I just wanted this to get off my screen as quickly as possible, But when it did, thankfully, we are welcomed back by Howard Finkel, who was actually shown on camera here briefly, which is rare for the time period. And he gives us the rules to the Royal Rumble, and we get a graphic. I had a flashback to War Games 92 with the rules are very simple.
Yeah, the thing to note here is 90-second intervals is what they claim. The intervals were all over the map here.
I'm glad you confirmed that because it felt that way. There were some that felt very short.
Yeah, there were some that were very short. There were some that were closer to 2 minutes. Most of them were just wildly inconsistent. And you'll see by the runtime of the match when we get there. HBK is out at number 1. Shawn Michaels, like we mentioned earlier. Chris Jericho at number 2. They start the match. And Jericho, he turns around during his entrance to show that it's actually Christian and not Jericho, allowing Jericho to sneak in from behind and hit Michaels with a low blow, and we are officially underway in the Royal Rumble. This is building to the awesome Chris Jericho Shawn Michaels match at WrestleMania 19, which you can hear our review of in the archives of this podcast.
Yeah, talk about a great match, which again, if you listen to the review of that, you'll hear me like undersell how great that match was. And then as we go on in that podcast, I kind of come to terms with how incredible that match really was.
It was so great.
And this is really cool too, because this is much more depth of, or it gives us kind of more context to that story and really them fleshing out how Jericho was trying to be Shawn Michaels. He wanted to go from number 1 to win it like Michaels did. They also mentioned that Shawn Michaels won the Rumble here from the number 1 spot in 1995. And can he repeat that feat here in 2003? They don't mention, I'm pretty sure, that year was the year where it was only 60-second intervals when Shawn Michaels won.
So Jericho, he nails Michaels with a chair to the face, and Michaels is busted open and bleeding everywhere. Harvard Chris in at number 3. He waits outside while Jericho keeps beating up Michaels.
Yeah, he's playing the part of Jerry Lawler here at the beginning of this Battle Royal.
And Chris Jericho tosses Michaels over the top, and he just crumbles to the floor in a bloody heap. This was an awesome start to this Rumble.
It was a shocking start. The only thing that bothered me about this is that I thought it was a rare misstep from Jim Ross in that, like, he did not. I just expected him to be much more Jim Rossy in terms of like going nuts that Shawn Michaels was eliminated so quickly. Like, he talked about it, said it was shocking, but it was just a very calm tone of voice that did not fit the moment, which was not very Jim Ross like. But again, at this point, the countdown starts. Things are moving very quickly, and here comes Rey Mysterio Jr. As Chris Nowinski is still on the floor, and Rey comes in, and he's a house of fire. He hits a springboard drop kick, a springboard head scissors on Chris Jericho, a pop-up face buster. But Jericho then gets right up from all of that and starts beating up Rey Mysterio as Chris Nowinski is still on the floor.
Yeah, Rey's thrown into the buckles. He kind of flips over the top rope, and Jericho just shoves him off, and he's hanging on between the turnbuckle pad and the ring post, but
awesome.
He's able to get back in with another springboard drop kick, this time off the top rope.
Yeah, like he's hanging on the post
Mysterio
outside the ring, like back to the crowd, like hanging onto the post for dear life to not get eliminated. Yeah, great stuff here. And then countdown again. Here comes Edge. And this is the beginning of the moments I have throughout this match where it's like, oh my God, this guy was on the roster. That guy was on the roster too. They had him in 2003. Like, you see the embarrassment of riches they had for a brief window when all the other companies had died and the guys that they brought in were still relatively close to their primes. And we get Edge in, and there's some awesome stuff here between the guys that are in the ring, Edge and Rey Mysterio, Edge and Jericho. Some chemistry here with Edge and some guys that I didn't recall him having that chemistry with.
Yeah, spears all around. And he's on the outside, but he was thrown through the ropes, not over the top. Yeah, Edge sits Mysterio on the middle of the top rope. And not the turnbuckle, the middle of the top rope. Gives him a big shove, but Mysterio hooks Edge with his legs, takes him over the top rope, but both men slide back under the bottom rope into the ring. Number 6.
Well, we had a moment where when that happens, both of Edge's feet hit the floor, but the refs are looking at it and they say only 1 foot, and Edge gets back in. Like, it's very brief, but I stopped it. There was toe on floor from both feet. So I'm watching the rest of this match under protest, but yeah, it continues.
Number 6 is Christian. He's in and he's immediately speared by Edge.
He also has amazing music from this time period. If you don't recall, it's a knockoff Bohemian Rhapsody where it starts with like this choir of voices saying, "Christian, you're finally on your own." Incredible stuff.
Harvard Chris thinks he eliminated Edge and Ray, but they slide back in. Mysterio and Edge, they try to double drop kick off the top turnbuckles.
Oh
right?
my God.
So,
yeah. This is the Rockers finisher that they used for a while and then gave up for basically exactly what you're going to describe. Why this is not a wise move.
No,
the level of timing and precision is just almost not humanly possible to pull this off properly.
No, Ray hits him and Edge just ends up landing on Nowinski's face. It looked absolutely brutal.
Well, because Ray jumped like a good half second before Edge. So Ray jumps, then you can see Edge like, oh God, I have to jump now too. And so Ray connects, and then Edge just murders him, just kills him with this follow through on the drop kick, lands on him with like the nastiest unintended splash to the face you've ever seen.
Number 7 is Chavo Guerrero, and we get 619s all around from Ray. Ray eliminates Harvard Chris. Jericho back in. He eliminates Mysterio with a clothesline over the top rope.
Dislike button. I was not happy with that.
Number 8, Tajiri is in.
I am very happy with this. Tajiri had such a good run in the early days of his run in WWE, not only in ring, which he was great here, just like he was in ECW, but he was such a great character. If you remember him with Regal somewhere around this time period, just awesome. And it was cool to see him here in the mix with guys like Chavo and Jericho. Fun times.
Yeah, how cool is it to see Bill DeMott at number 9? He's the former Hugh Morris, the former General Rection.
Well, that my notes, the second he made it to the ring is, oh my God, Misfits in Action reunion, General Rection and Lieutenant Loco ride again.
Bash at the Beach 2000 if you go back to the archives. Yeah.
Yes. I wanted to mention, because this felt like Jim Ross parachuting in via time travel from 2020 here in 2003. Tajiri gets Chavo in kind of like a reverse crucifix position and then just spins around. Ross calls it a modified airplane spin and then gets all crotchety and says, well, I'm sure it's got a name and someone will correct me for it later.
Number 10 is Tommy Dreamer, and he comes out with plunder. He's got garbage cans, kendo sticks, etc.
He also looks like he borrowed Big Show's jeans from earlier. One other thing just quickly on Bill DeMott, the announcers keep talking about something has happened to him. He's not quite right. And then I immediately started thinking of Kevin Sullivan from Slamboree 95. And I'm wondering if the Master is going to pop up on the Titantron and then, Bill DeMott's going to get cold and run away. I don't know. This is weird.
So we get kendo stick shots all around from Tommy Dreamer.
And Edge
joins in, yeah. And
you got a huge ECW chant here as people were still feeling the ECW love.
Edge hits DeMott in the head with a kendo stick, and he goes up and over the top rope. He's eliminated, and it was the silliest. It was sillier looking than it sounded.
It was. This was cartoon stuff for sure.
Yeah, so Chris Jericho and Christian kill Dreamer with his own weapons.
Yes, and then the garbage can lid version of a concerto, and then Dreamer is just dumped unceremoniously out, and the crowd lustily boos at this point. They wanted more ECW representation here.
We've still got Tajiri, who goes for a tarantula on Jericho, but Jericho throws him out, eliminating Tajiri. So
I'm sad again, and then the countdown hits, and here we go.
We see Jericho is cut, and he's bleeding slightly from a kendo stick shot from Tommy Dreamer here. So
yes, that is true. And
yeah,
that's
number
early
11
on in the match for Jericho to be busted open. But yeah, number 11. This is a man who at this point was called B Squared, and we also get some great WWE speak. As at the time, I thought it was only Michael Cole who always said this about guys who were friends, but apparently this was just like an edict that you had to say. as Jim Ross calls him, quote, John Cena's former running buddy. And I don't think they mean like they went jogging together, like they were just friends, but they'd always call them running buddies. And yeah, at this point I remember that, oh yeah, B Squared is Bull Buchanan, and B Squared is his rap gimmick, his rap name that he had as the running buddy of Doctor of Thugonomics era John Cena.
Yeah, Bling Bling Buchanan, Bull Buchanan.
God, I didn't even put that together. Jesus.
Yeah, no, he's this is B Squared.
The craziest thing about this, which you mentioned to me, as far as that this was his last match in WWE.
Yes, this would be his final match in WWE.
He would then go on to spend, and I remember this very clearly because this was when he went to Japan, was when I was already watching Japan, but this is when I started doing podcasts about Japanese pro wrestling. He spent 8 years in Japan, wrestling for 5 years in All Japan Pro Wrestling and winning the All Asia Tag Team titles with Rico Constantino. And then he went on to have 3 more years in Pro Wrestling Noah through 2010.
Yeah.
He was not very good. It was one of life's great mysteries that he got as long of a run there as he did.
Yeah, no, Edge dumps B Squared really quick here, and yeah, that would be his last WWE match ever, and it was not a good run here at all. Edge spears Chavo, eliminating him. Jericho, he does the skin the cat spot to stay in, which was of course made famous by Shawn Michaels in the 1995 Rumble referenced earlier.
And Jim Ross points that out. Another great callback.
Jericho dumps Edge and Christian and is all alone in the ring. And this is my favorite part when I'm watching with friends, when I yell, Chris Jericho wins the Royal Rumble.
Yes. Well, that's what I wrote down. If I'm Chris Jericho and if I'm the Chris Jericho character, I am absolutely demanding that the timekeeper rings the bell. And if I don't win the Rumble, I'm coming out the next day on Raw and declaring that I won. I was the last man standing. There was no one left in the ring. Everyone else had been thrown over the top rope. I am in the main event for WrestleMania. I would start pointing at the WrestleMania sign right there if it had happened. And how great of a spot if the WrestleMania sign was there. How great would that be if Jericho eliminates Edge and Christian and then points to the WrestleMania sign and just then like starts to leave as though he won the Rumble.
Number 12 is Rob Van Dam, and Jericho is just begging off while RVD kicks the crap out of him.
And the people love Rob Van Dam, as we've talked about on previous podcasts. His WWE run was very successful from a fan perspective. They were into him big time here as he hits everything: jump side kicks, spinning leg drops, rolling thunder. He hits a buzzsaw kick that Jim Ross for some reason calls a modified shining wizard.
He did. And then he gave a shout out to Hurricane Helms over at the World in Times Square.
Yes, which we didn't get a visual of on this show. I was hoping to see like Mark Henry or I don't know, Rico Constantino, someone like that at the World.
Number 13 is Matt Hardy, and we get a Matt fact that during his entrance that Matt strongly dislikes mustard. Not one of the best.
Most Matt facts I find myself agreeing with, and that is definitely in that list for me.
They double team RVD. Jericho misses a lion salt. RVD hits the 5-star frog splash onto Jericho, which brings out number 14, Eddie Guerrero.
With a buzz cut, which is kind of weird.
Yeah, RVD now goes for a monkey flip on Eddie Guerrero. And he's standing on Eddie's thighs as he gives the RVD thumbs to the shoulder chant. And nobody takes a monkey flip like Eddie Guerrero takes a monkey flip.
He goes flying across the ring, almost goes out. RVD tries to throw him out. Matt Hardy makes the save. Then we get, like, to this point, this was maybe the best in-ring action I've seen in a Royal Rumble. Like, usually it's a lot of just punch kick or a lot of great spots in this first half of the Rumble. Unfortunately, here with Eddie Guerrero and Rob Van Dam, this was not one of them. Eddie goes to the top rope and hits this really awkward frog splash, and then you can see him check on Rob Van Dam. My theory on this is that this was going to be one of those things where Eddie goes to jump off the top but then rolls through, and I think RVD was supposed to move and didn't. So instead, like mid-move, Eddie kind of tries to do the frog splash as best he can, but kind of just lands all body weight and elbow on RVD's head. And like I said, you can see him kind of, on his face, and you can see him kind of, Eddie use his own forearm to shield so like the camera doesn't see it, but he's clearly checking on RVD and making sure he's okay.
Number 15, Jeff Hardy is in. He goes right after his brother Matt. Jeff tries to toss Matt, but Shannon Moore on the outside. He lays on the ground, feet in the air to keep Matt from falling off the apron. Jeff to
the stuff here between Jeff and Matt was so much better than whatever that match was between them a couple months later at WrestleMania.
Jeff to the their match was a couple years it was a year prior at Vengeance. Yeah.
That's right. That was the Vengeance show that we reviewed. Okay, yeah. Well, that's right, because the Mania was Hardy and Mysterio, right?
Mysterio, yep.
Well, this was so much
better.
I actually felt like they disliked each other, whereas that one, it just felt like two guys going through the motions. So yeah.
Jeff goes for a swanton off the top, but Shannon Moore is in the ring, lays on top of Matt to shield him from it, but Jeff does it anyway, squashing everyone. Number 16 is Rosie from the 3-Minute Warning. And
with B Squared's former All Asia Tag Team Champion Rico Constantino. Rosie is wearing a shirt that says Dirty South, which, okay, seems like an odd fit, but cool. Him and RVD go at it for a while. Rosie hits a rope-assisted spin kick on Van Damme, which is pretty impressive. Jim Ross says that Rosie is 400 pounds. I laugh. And at this point, I note, wow, there are a lot of human beings in the ring again after it being pretty thin for a while.
Yeah, you blew right past Rico Constantino's spectacular sideburns. Now, I do. I personally did have better sideburns at the time, and we discussed it at WrestleMania that year. Number
Meaning
7.
You and Rico Constantino literally discussed this. There is photographic evidence.
Yes,
and
I have a photo
we probably
of us.
should.
Yeah.
Can we post that? Would you consent to that being posted on the feed?
We will post it on our Twitter. The picture of me and Rico Constantino comparing our sideburns together. So
we really should. That could be an alternate cover on social media for this week's show. I didn't even think of that.
Number 17 is Test, and he beats everybody up. Number 18, Rapping John Cena is in. So this is the doctor of thugonomics, John Cena.
He raps his entire entrance, pretty much the entire 90 seconds. I will note just prior that when Test comes into the ring, Jim Ross says the testicles are on their feet. Apparently that was what they called Test fans. Also, Stacy Keibler was with Test, which I had no recollection of. And it is clear here that whatever they had been doing with Test at Vengeance or at King of the Ring, whatever it was, the year prior, they had lost interest completely in Test. He was a guy. They made fun of him with the name of his supposed fans. He just had generic blue bicycle shorts. He just existed here.
He was ready for a push coming out of that King of the Ring. Here he's just a dude, and
he had gotten pushed and tumbled hard down the other side of the mountain and was down way down in the valley at this point.
Jericho beats up Rapping John Cena. Number 19 is Charlie Haas, and Jeff Hardy's on the top rope. He gets shoved off by RVD, and he goes all the way to the floor. He's eliminated.
Yeah, Hardy was going for that whisper in the wind, that run up the ropes and then hit that backflip, but RVD threw him out. Could we also just briefly mention the incredibly baggy jeans for John Cena? This was pre-jorts.
That's right.
Pre-jorts, and you think how that's like all-time bad gear, his jorts, and then you see him here and you think, wow, the jorts were so much better.
What an improvement.
An improvement. I don't understand how he moved wearing these jeans. He did not look particularly great here, even though Jim Ross said that he was a future main eventer, a future champion, a future WrestleMania main eventer, and boy, did he call that one.
Number 20 is Rikishi, and they mentioned that this is his 8th Royal Rumble.
But he's never won.
No, his first one, he was making a difference, right?
He was. He was wearing those jackets and making a difference, and yeah.
Number 21 is Jamal, the partner of Rosie from 3-Minute Warning. And
who would later go on to be Umaga.
The future Umaga, correct.
Also, can we mention briefly that Jim Ross says that John Cena and Rikishi had a rivalry on SmackDown? Okay, I actually don't believe that, but sure, maybe.
The ring is filling up here, and I immediately wrote in my notes, the ring's filling up, so Kane must be coming out soon, because and literally as I finished typing that sentence, in comes number 22, it's Kane, and this is common in Royal Rumbles. It would fill up, Kane would come in and run wild, and he would eliminate a bunch of guys. Held the record at this point for most eliminations in a Rumble.
Yep, so, 11 in 2001 they referenced, so just 2 years later here. And yeah, Kane gets in, he's beating everyone up. He backdrops Rosie over the top rope, a double choke slam on Matt Hardy and Shannon Moore, who is not in the match, but has been in the ring probably more than some guys who are in the match. But then Kane tries to throw Jericho out. Jericho comes extremely close to coming out, or to falling out of the ring and being eliminated, but skins the cat in a manner yet again and stays in as we move to entrance number 23.
Shelton Benjamin in at 23.
And the crowd, the thing I'll notice that the crowd, like Shelton Benjamin and Charlie Haas are good, and like people recognize they're good. But when their Angle music hits and it's not Kurt Angle, people are so sad.
Number 24 is Booker T. And
with his WCW Harlem Heat music that we referenced.
Yeah, on the Mount Rushmore of great wrestling themes.
Absolutely.
Booker runs wild, spin-a-rooney. He eliminates Eddie Guerrero by backdropping him over the top rope. And
that looked like an unpleasant elimination for Eddie Guerrero, by the way.
Eddie
that was hard.
He landed right on his knees on the outside. Just ouch. Ugh. And the story of the Rumble at this point is that Jericho is still in this match as number 25 is coming out, and it's the A-Train.
Who is, at this point, we've charted the hairiness of A-Train. He is very hairy here. Also, we've charted the name of his finisher because it has gone through many iterations on the different shows we've watched on this podcast. It has been the Baldo Bomb. It has been the Derailer. It has been the Tree Slam. Here, over and over and over again, Jim Ross simply calls it the A-Train Bomb.
Yeah, he gives one to Cena, and he's destroying everyone until Rikishi cuts him off. And then all of a sudden, Shawn Michaels, bandaged up, dried blood on his face. He hits the ring attacking Chris Jericho. Test, of all people, boots Jericho and throws him over the top rope.
Test of all people eliminates Jericho. I have that same thing written down. One quick Fashion Corner note, as I know we like to do on this podcast. Everything Shawn Michaels did in his brief appearances in this Royal Rumble were great, but they were undermined by the fact that he looked like a walking candy cane. Gear, this red, white, striped Shawn Michaels gear, he is looked like Christmas time just a month too late.
So the story of Jericho being in the match is over. He's been eliminated due to the Michaels interference.
Michaels hits a plancha to the floor and punches him.
Yeah, just continuing the assault on Jericho and moving this story forward. Number 26 is Tough Enough Maven. He's in...
By the way, Tough Enough Maven, who at first, when this happens, I'm like, oh yeah, it's Maven. He just won Tough Enough. Then they tell us that he eliminated The Undertaker. I don't know if it was last year or...
It was a year prior. Yeah, it was the year before.
In the 2002 Royal Rumble, he eliminated Undertaker. Weird, but okay. To me, the saddest thing about the Royal Rumble match itself is that Maven had been at least a year removed from being on the MTV reality show Tough Enough, and his Titantron was literally a still of the Tough Enough logo.
So
that's it.
Lame. Number 27 is Goldust, and Goldust, he comes in, kicks Maven low, and then Team Angle just eliminates Goldust.
Yeah, he got the Bushwhacker Luke spot here for sure.
Team Angle eliminates Booker T as well in a surprise. And number 28 comes out. It's Batista. And
very young, totally ripped, just looking like a star Batista, who is very green, but you can already tell that he's going to be a big deal. And the announcers are really playing him up as a future star.
This was Batista's Royal Rumble debut. Test, he goes for the big boot to Batista, but Batista pulls down the top rope. Test goes flying over the top rope. He's eliminated. Batista clotheslines Rikishi over the top rope, eliminating him. And number 29 is in, and it's Brock Lesnar. Lesnar comes in, tosses both members of Team Angle. Lesnar picks up Matt Hardy, gives him an
Oh my
F5
God.
over the top to the floor where he lands on Haas and Benjamin. He's out.
This was horrifying because not only does he land on Haas and Benjamin, but his face comes millimeters away from hitting the apron. At this point, Jim Ross is absolutely losing it at just the Haas athletic specimen and spectacle that is Brock Lesnar. And honestly, I can't blame him.
Number 30, Biker Taker is in. And he comes in, clothesline scene over the top rope. Jamal clothesline over the top rope.
What was that lame music that The Undertaker had? This was like a remixed Big Show song with motorcycle sounds. I don't know if this was his actual music, if this was dubbed.
No, that was his actual
lame.
Music. That was his actual music. I looked it up because I was trying to figure out where it fit in the Limp Bizkit Kid Rock timeline of Undertaker theme songs.
Where it fit in the Undertaker theme song discography.
Yeah, so he's running wild, eliminating everybody. Maven then drop kicks Undertaker from behind, playing off the spot you referenced earlier where he eliminated Taker the year prior, but this time he doesn't go over the top rope.
He thinks he did, though. He's celebrating. He turns around, he's celebrating. He turns around, and the Undertaker is still there.
Choke slam on Maven. He's thrown out and eliminated. A-Train bomb finally stops Taker. RVD and Kane, they team up to eliminate the A-Train. Then Kane tosses RVD, his own partner, over the top rope, press slamming him and throwing him over the top rope.
This was awesome because the whole thing was he press slams RVD and he acts like he's going to throw him onto, I can't remember whoever it was that was on the mat, like basically you do a double team rocket launcher in the middle of the ring. And instead, as he has RVD press over his head, he just turns and throws him to the floor. And yes, it was every man for himself.
The final four here is Kane, Undertaker, Batista, and Lesnar.
So no cruiserweights made it to the final four.
Besides Kane, you could see either of the other three winning, that always makes for a great Rumble finish. You mentioned it earlier when it would give it away when the end of the Rumble, there would only be one guy that could legit main event WrestleMania. Here you had three.
And then even Kane, like you don't think he's going to win, but it's still like it's Kane, it's a battle royal, and he eliminates everybody. So it felt somewhat believable. It was weird because I feel like usually, even in those scenarios where they have a bunch of guys who can win, they do have like the oddball guy, like a Rick Martel or somebody who made it a long time.
That Mr. Perfect Royal Rumble where he made a return. Yeah, that was great. Lesnar with a belly-to-belly overhead throw to Batista, F5 to Kane, and then Lesnar and Taker have a battle. And
finally, they had teased this earlier, and then Kane and Batista had broken it up before it could start.
Taker gets hot-shotted onto the top rope, but falls back into the ring.
Well, Lesnar has to basically keep himself from eliminating Taker. He hot-shots him, and then Taker is like, centrifugal force, gravity, it's all taken hold, and Taker is hurtling to the floor, and Lesnar just like grabs his legs, and it's like a seesaw on the playground, and just like flips him back in the ring. I was expecting to hear or to see the boing effect from like the old Batman live action TV show from the 60s pop up on the screen as Lesnar fell back into the ring.
F5 attempt is countered into a tombstone by Undertaker onto Lesnar. Taker catches Batista with a clothesline over the top rope. He's eliminated. Kane and Taker then shake hands, looking like they're about to team up. The brothers are going to double team Lesnar. But Taker quickly turns on Kane, tosses him over the top rope. You're down to your final two, The Undertaker and Lesnar.
But in comes Batista, gets back in.
With a chair.
Has a chair, but that backfires. Taker takes him out. But at that point, Taker has his back to Brock Lesnar, and I think you can tell what's coming next.
Yep, Lesnar from behind dumps Undertaker over the top rope. Brock Lesnar wins the 2003 Royal Rumble, will go on to WrestleMania 19, and Taker says that if you win the title, I want a shot. 53 minutes, 41 seconds, and the show goes off the air. So
also Lesnar eliminates Taker, and then Taker is on the floor. It was I got what they were going for, but Taker almost looked too bemused. Like he actually didn't care about getting eliminated. So that just felt a little weird.
So best match?
Oof, that's tough because the obvious choice and the only choice you could say on a show that had a match this great is Kurt Angle and Chris Benoit. I would go so far as to say, if you can strip everything away from it, which is almost impossible, that this might be the best match that we've reviewed on this podcast, and that includes 2 Ric Flair versus Ricky Steamboat matches.
Sure.
But it is far from my favorite match that I watched. It's far from the match that I enjoyed the most while watching anything for this podcast, because it was so hard to... I like we talked about, you'd slip into it, but you just could not pull yourself away from the reality of the situation.
And I could not pull myself out of the reality of the situation of Dawn Marie versus Tori Wilson. That had to be one of the worst things we've ever seen. The match wasn't as horrible as having to sit through the recap of that storyline and try your head not to explode.
No, the match wasn't as bad as the wedding match or the stupid Miller Lite thing on the Mania show, but it still goes on the Mount Rushmore of terrible segments that we've watched on this show. So on this podcast, I should say, so far.
So a good show, a standard WWE show on the road to WrestleMania here.
And a decent Rumble.
It was a decent Rumble.
The first half of the Rumble I thought was great, and then it just kind of became a run-of-the-mill Rumble by the end.
And with that, we're going to wrap it up. A reminder, every single Thursday we post on social media what this week's episode will cover, so make sure you're following us and interacting with the show on Twitter at WrestleAtRandom. Same for Instagram, Facebook.com/WrestlingAtRandom. And of course, the entire back catalog of this podcast is found at WrestlingAtRandom.com, along with all the links to subscribe. Tell your wrestling fan friends, tell your former wrestling fan friends about us as well. Have them come.
And always, as I say, Jeremy, tell your former friends who might still be wrestling fans, because even if they don't like you, they'll probably like this podcast.
And we are way long on time, so with that, we're going to wrap it up. Adam, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Jeremy. Good time as always.
Thanks, everyone, for listening, and we'll talk to you again next time.